So tonight is sponsored by the Ilbehers and Zechus Le'iloi Neshmasa of Bracha Bas Machmal Bachmal. Her Neshama should have an Aliyah. There's a Bergen-Belsen in Chanukah. There's a famous story, the Bluzher Rebbe, which I get a lot of chizik from this story. The inmates wanted to light the Chanukah lights in the concentration camp. How are they going to do that? So they did. They saved oil they were able to find. I'm not clear if it was from some of the food. I don't think it was from the food. Here it says, the version I read, they got it from the shoe polish. They were able to save up shoe polish and extract the oil from the shoe polish or something. And then they took from their uniforms, their concentration camp uniforms, they took off strings. They made wicks. And with that, they made a Chanukah light. And the Bluzher Rebbe made the first blessing. Napkins. It could be by the bathroom. Oh, right there. So the Asher Kedishanu Sav Tzivanu Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah. Then he made the next bracha. She'asa Nisim L'Havosenu B'Yamim Hahem B'Zman Hazeh, who thanking Hashem for performing miracles in days long past. And then after that, he made the bracha. He looked around for a little bit, and he hesitated. Then he made the bracha Shehachiyanu V'Kiyamanu V'Giyanu L'Zman Hazeh for the first night of Chanukah. So after, somebody asked him. He said, "How did you make that bracha?" He said, "What was going on? You hesitated." He said, Shehachiyanu, what it means, we thank Hashem for keeping us alive, that we've reached this time. So I'm looking around the concentration camp. How could I possibly thank Hashem for being here right now? I felt it wasn't honest for me to make the bracha. But then I looked around at everyone's faces. Everyone risking their life in the concentration camp to light the Chanukah menorah, and using the uniform as a wick, and scraping oil together, and how committed Jews are to the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. So then I could make the bracha of Shechiyanu, that Hashem has kept us alive to this day, so I could see such people that are committed to Hashem. Even in these dire circumstances, they're willing to endanger their lives to do the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. And that's what Jews are. Jews, the purpose of our lives is to serve Hashem. And that means when a Jew is really committed, in those dire circumstances, even when his life's in danger, he'll do everything he can to do the mitzvah. I always find that story very inspiring, and it relates to what we're talking about tonight. The Gemara says that, on one hand, there seems to be a contradiction. It says that you can translate the Torah into Greek, or it calls Greek a beautiful language. And on the other hand, it's said that when the Greeks forced the rabbis to translate the Torah into Greek, they fasted. They always fasted. It was a very, very sad day. We actually fast. The Sar B'Tevis, that's one of the things that's coming up. It's one of the things we fast for. It's a very sad thing. So on one hand, we see that Greek is a beautiful language. It seems like you can express ideas very beautifully in the Greek language. But on the other hand, we fasted when the Torah was translated to Greek. Also, it says Yavan Zu Choshech, that the Greeks are compared to darkness. So how could it be, on one hand, the Greek language is a beautiful language, but on the other hand, they're considered to be a nation of darkness? How do you have that together? And furthermore, the Greeks had some of the most beautiful culture in the world. They had beautiful art. People still go to the Parthenon thousands of years later. Beautiful buildings. They had the birthplace of great ideas like democracy, the philosophers, right? Aristotle, Plato, and if you watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Socrates. I don't know if you're any 80s fans now.
It's mentioned in Gemara, right?
The Rambam talks about Aristotle a lot. I don't remember if it's mentioned in the Gemara, but the Ramah writes that the prophet Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, met Plato and taught Plato all of his wisdom. If you look, there's a book called Torah, Chazal, and Science by Rav Moshe Meiselman. In that book, the beginning of the book, he talks about how a lot of Greek philosophy was actually taken from the Jews. And there's a lot of sources to this, that although the wisdom from Greece came from the Jews, and they kind of twisted it around. But being that they were very bright, no one denies that they were very bright and they had a lot of culture. So why were they called darkness? So the reason is because anything which is a replacement for Torah, and when we say Torah we mean a life of serving Hashem, anything that serves of a replacement is called darkness. So even though they had philosophy, they had art, they had all these wonderful things, allegedly wonderful things. They believed that the purpose of their lives was to dedicate themselves to these allegedly wonderful things, that the purpose in life is to be a great philosopher, a great artist, a great athlete, right? They used to compete in the Olympics naked. They used to admire the human body. And they were also, pedophilia was an accepted practice back then in ancient Greece. Another great book, if you're in a book reading mood, is called The World Perfect by Ken Spiro. He interviewed some college students and asked them to list what they believe is the most moral stances or the most important things that a person should believe. And they were things like valuing life, protecting children. And he shows how the only group in the ancient world that practiced these morals and these ideas were the Jewish people. The Romans and the Greeks, they did not, and they did quite the opposite. They would take babies that were deformed and kill them. Oh, hello, thank you for change of location, but you found us.
Yeah, I got the text.
Okay. I was gonna.
Selection. They choose just good babies.
Yeah, and the other babies they would kill. And then in Greece, it was disgusting. They used to have an older person would tutor a younger person, a child, and would also have a pedophilic relationship with a child. And this was accepted. This was common practice in Greece. So the Greek culture, it was a replacement for Torah. Anything which is a replacement for the idea that we're here to serve Hashem is called darkness, no matter how quote-unquote beautiful it could be. And there's actually a theory to this. My Rosh Yeshiva discusses it in his book, a third book, so there's 3 books everyone has to read. This one's called The Eye of the Storm. It's on page 217. He talks about that people believe the humanities, to study the humanities, it makes you more human, that if you could appreciate a concert by Felix Mendelssohn or Aaron Copland, Leonard Bernstein, pick your favorite composer. If you could appreciate Rembrandt, you could appreciate Leonardo da Vinci, Irving Berlin, the author of the greatest,
all the Christmas songs.
Right, the Jewish author of the most popular Christmas song, White Christmas. It's really unbelievable. Yeah. I heard he wrote it in July also, in the middle of the summer. But
the muse hit him.
Yeah. But people used to think that if you engage in these things, right, you're not just watching football, watching NASCAR, and drinking beer. Drinking beer and watching NASCAR, that's like animals do that. But if you go to the symphony, you go to Lincoln Center, you're a human being. That's what they believe. But we see that that's not true. We talked about a few weeks ago how the Germans, who were the most cultured, most sophisticated, most appreciative of philosophy and whatnot, they were the most barbaric.
At least they thought so.
Yeah, they were the most barbaric, most disgusting people, most vicious people that existed. We talked about how Mengele had that lady play the violin for him, and every time she made a mistake, he would send his dog to bite her.
I thought you played piano.
Oh, it was piano? Oh, he played violin. Right, very good, very good. Good thing you're here. So, I know you're listening now. I have to be careful what I say. But that's not what Judaism believes. That's not what makes. And just to add, you can look at the college campuses now. They all believe in the humanities, liberal arts. Looking at what happened in college campuses over the past year, does anybody believe that those people who are viciously attacking Jewish students and encouraging anti-Semitism, those people are more human because they engage in the liberal arts, because they
much less, so like vicious animals.
they study dance theory or whatever they do. So, what makes a person human? The thing that makes a person human is when he dedicates himself to something beyond himself. When he cares about others, and when he dedicates beyond yourself means 2 things. It means thinking about other people, dedicating your life not to your own pleasure fulfillment, but dedicating your life to help others, and dedicating your life to Hashem. Somebody who goes to Lincoln Center is not going for any human reason. He's going because he enjoys it. The guy in West Virginia enjoys beer and NASCAR. There's nothing wrong with that. And the guy in lives in the Upper West Side enjoys going to Lincoln Center to hear the opera. They're just different ways of stimulating the senses. That's all it is. Judaism, we reject that. We say to be a human being, you have to dedicate yourself to other people, and you have to dedicate yourself to serving Hashem, because a human being is, the difference between an animal and a human is that we have the ability not to follow our urges and not to follow the things that we want to do. We could say, oh wait, I want to do this thing now, but I can use my intellect and say, that's not what I should be doing. I can live for a higher purpose. Animals can't do that. So if we're a human being that just fulfills every desire that we have, whether it's going to a NASCAR event and drinking beer, or whether it's going to the opera, if it's
don't put down the drinking of beer.
I'm not putting it down. There's nothing wrong with it. If you do it if you do it responsibly. But if your whole life is just to drink beer whenever you feel like it and watch NASCAR, all you're doing is you're an animal because you're just going after your desires. But if you say, I want to drink beer now and I want to watch NASCAR, but I have a chavrusa and I want to study Torah, even though I don't feel like doing that right now, I go study Torah, that's what makes a human being a human. Or your desire is to speak negatively about this person who just wronged you, and you say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. That's what makes us human, when we're able to control it. But the Greeks were the opposite. They went after all of their desires, everything, all of their instincts. The difference is that the Greeks, people thought they're a little more sophisticated. They're not like the barbarians. They built a Parthenon. They have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. They probably had nice music also. They have these sculptures. People thought that, they're more sophisticated, they're more human, but really we see that's not the case at all. So now there's another interesting thing, a very simple question. When I first heard this question, I was shocked. Because since you're a little kid, this is going to tie into everything. Since we're a little kid, we're told, why do we light the menorah for 8 nights? It's because they only had enough oil for one day, and it lasted for 8 days. So the Pnei Yeshua asks a very interesting question. Aaron, maybe you're familiar with this concept. There's a concept in the Gemara. You can find it on Yuma 50a. It's called Tumah Hutra B'tzibor. Tumah Hutra B'tzibor means that when most of the congregation is impure, then you don't have to worry about the laws of purity and impurity. So over here we have the Jewish people were fighting a war. There were dead bodies. Most of the people were impure. So what was the big deal that they found pure oil? Like, who cares? Kind of throws the whole miracle of Chanukah for a loop, this question. So,
if they didn't have any impure oil, they would have had to use the impure oil.
Right, they had impure oil. They could have used it. What was the big miracle that they found pure oil? They could have used the according to this rule in the Talmud, that Tumah Hutra B'tzibor, they could have used the impure oil. What was the big deal? So, the Pri Chadash answers like this. The law of Tumah Hutra B'tzibor only applies to Tumas Mace. Tumas Mace is an impurity when you come in contact with a dead body, but there's another impurity called Tumas Zav. Tumas Zav, the rabbis instituted a law that the Gentiles are impure rabbinically because of Tumas Zav. Now, why did they do that? They did that because they didn't want the Jews intermingling with the non-Jews. Why? Because their cultures were so different. The Jewish culture and the non-Jewish culture were so different. Like we said, the Jewish culture was that we're dedicated to Hashem, and we live our lives for Hashem, whereas the non-Jewish culture is dedicated, the secular culture is dedicated to living for your own pleasure fulfillment. So that the rabbis made a law that anything that they touch becomes impure rabbinically. And the Pri Chadash says that law of tumah, of impurity being allowed when most of the people are impure, doesn't apply to this rabbinic tumah. It doesn't apply. So really, it was a miracle. The miracle that they found the pure oil, it wasn't a miracle that they found pure oil because of tumas mace, of touching a dead body, but rather the miracle is that they found pure oil that hadn't been contaminated by tumas zav, this special rabbinic impurity that was meant to separate the Jews from the secular society of the time. And when we think about it, that makes the Chanukah story even more meaningful. Why? Because 2 counts. This Chanukah is a holiday that was instituted by the rabbis. It's not like Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot that are in the Torah. This was instituted by the rabbis. And the whole miracle was that they found oil that didn't have the impurity that was also instituted by the rabbis. It was a rabbinic impurity, a rabbinic purity that they found. And what was the whole purpose of this purity? The whole purpose of this purity was to keep the Jews and the secular society apart. And in the miracle of Chanukah, we were able to find that special pure oil, which is very apropos because there were many Jews at the time. We have a term called misyavnim. Many Jews were traitors at the time of Chanukah. They joined the Greek culture to fight against the religious Jews. You don't have, now we have it, but we didn't have it. We didn't have it in other Galus in Mitzrayim. You don't find, when we were in Egypt, you don't find that there were Jews. So that there was a special term for Jews who joined the Egyptians. You don't find there was a special term for Jews who joined the Babylonians. But we do find there was a special term for Jews who joined the Greeks, misyavnim. And So the miracle of Chanukah with the oil was that they were able to find this oil that with the impurity that was instituted to keep Jews in the secular culture aside. By the way, just allowing me to vent for a second, during COVID, there was Cuomo was attacking the quote-unquote ultra-Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn for not keeping COVID procedures. So besides the fact that they found that the mask mandate was whatever, and that they were lying about the origins of the COVID and all of that. So what got me very upset, before we knew any of that, we also found out later that Cuomo had redlined Jewish districts. It was only Jewish neighborhoods where he made these special laws, special regulations about COVID. There were similar neighborhoods that had a high level of COVID where Cuomo didn't make the same rules, right? But he only made these special rules for the Jewish neighborhoods. Before we knew any of that, there were Jews, quote-unquote rabbis, I'm putting rabbis in quotes, even people who claimed they were Orthodox rabbis who signed a thing supporting Cuomo and attacking the From Jews in Brooklyn.
Right.
So if you don't think that Messiavnim don't exist, now do you think any of these people ever apologized when they found out that Cuomo was specifically attacking the Orthodox Jews because they were Torah-observant Jews? So
Cuomo himself didn't even apologize.
Right, if forget Cuomo, these people are supposed to be rabbis, and what do the rabbis do? They attack the ultra-Orthodox. At least, if you want to say that maybe they had a point before they did it, which they didn't, why didn't they apologize after they found out that Cuomo was specifically targeting Jews? You have to have people that are, the only leaders of the Jewish people should be people that are committed to leading the Jewish people and serving Hashem. And one of the things you do when you serve Hashem is you support other Jews against anti-Semites. When you have people that are willing to stand up for the rights of minorities, I know I mentioned this story because it drives me. This is my pet peeve. You have people I've seen online that I knew from high school. Anytime African American gets attacked or another minority, rightfully they defend them and they say this is wrong, this is racism. But anytime someone attacks an Orthodox person, they're ready to give answers. Oh, I could really understand where they're coming from because when I was a kid, an Orthodox person offended me, and therefore blah blah blah. If you're not consistent in that, then to paraphrase Jeff Foxworthy, you might be an anti-Semite.
Might be.
Rav Leib Bakst says, why don't we have a Megillah on Chanukah? We have a Megillah, but we don't read it. It's Megillah Antiochus. There's no mitzvah to read a Megillah. It's actually very interesting if you get a chance to read Megillah Antiochus. It's like a lahavdil, like the movie Gladiator. It's like a lot of drama, and it's very exciting. And the bravery of the Jewish people that stood up for Hashem is unbelievable. But not that you need me to say it. But so Rav Leibach, why don't we read a Megillah on Chanukah? Well, we read one by Megillah by Purim. So he says, on Purim, the Jewish people, their bodies were being attacked. Haman was trying to murder us. He was trying to destroy us, and we won. The story ended, so we could read a Megillah because there's an end of the story. Chanukah, that's not true. The secular world is still putting pressure on us to assimilate, to still be Misyavnim, to still give up our values for the values of the non-Jewish culture. So that's still going on. And since the story of Chanukah is still going on, we can't read a book about it because the story is still happening. It's not over yet. It's interesting. Yep. You ever wonder also, Ma'us Sur, it says, Yevanim nikbetzu alai azai mechashmon. The Greeks, they stood up against me. Upartzu chomos migdalai v'timu kol hashmanim. They made breaches. They broke the walls of my towers, and they contaminated all of my oil. What are these walls? They made breaches on the walls. What breaches in the walls? What is that talking about?
The gates around the,
so there were different gates, but there's a special gate called the Chil, and the Chil, it had, if you were not Jewish, you were allowed to go into the temple to a certain part, right? Women were allowed to go further, Yisraelim were allowed to go further, Kohanim could go further. So there was a certain Chil. It said it had I think it was in Greek and Hebrew, maybe in Aramaic also. It says that anyone who's not Jewish who goes past here gets the death penalty. And that's what the Greeks couldn't. I actually saw, you can go to the Israel Museum, you can actually see the stone. They still have one of the stones from the second base of Mikdash. It's very cool. You can see it in the Israel Museum. So the thing that they couldn't handle, the Greeks, was that there should be any differentiation between Jews and non-Jews. That's what they couldn't handle. So they broke down those walls. Because they say, well, you think you're special because you worship Hashem, you think you're the chosen people because you have a special mission to serve God and to live for spirituality and to not live for physicality, different than us. We can't accept that. We're not going to kill you, but you have to be like us. You have to live a life dedicated to having physical strength, intellectual strength, culture, none of this serving Hashem. The Greeks, as we mentioned last week, they didn't believe in anything that you couldn't sense with the five senses. So that's actually, if you ever wonder what it meant, ufartzu chomos migdalai, that they broke down the walls, that's what it's referring to. Another line in Mao's Torah, which I don't understand, one of my Rebbeim asked this once, I don't think I ever found a compelling answer. It says, when it talks about Haman, it's totally on the side, it says, they hung rov banav v'kinyanov. They hanged his possessions and most of his sons. I don't know what it means, most of his sons. Why most of his sons? They hung 10 sons. He had more sons? They didn't hang?
He had one more.
He had one more?
He killed himself.
Oh, so that's what it means. That's what it means. Oh, his daughter, no? It was his daughter?
Who?
Haman's daughter?
I think it was his son.
Haman's son killed himself? I don't know. Haman's son. So most of his sons. Okay, I have to look into it. That could be an answer. Okay, so let's summarize. We're saying that Chanukah, the Greeks, they didn't want to kill us, they wanted us to assimilate, because the Greeks believed the purpose of life is enhancement of the self in the physical way, and having culture, intellectually, even with philosophy, whereas the Jews said, those are all nice things, but the purpose of life is to use your intellect to serve Hashem. The purpose of life is to serve God, is to say, oh, I have desires to do X, Y, Z, but what Gufa makes me human is not by going to a symphony. What makes me human is by overcoming those desires, by saying, yeah, I feel like doing this right now, but I'm not going to because Hashem doesn't want me to. Or I'm going to do this and worship Hashem. I'm going to think beyond myself. That's what makes a human being. And Greece is called darkness, even though it had all these sophisticated things, because that was viewed as a replacement for Torah. So what we have to do during Hanukkah is to recommit ourselves to this idea of what a Jew is supposed to live for. And we have a special siyata d'shmaya, the special light and holiness of Hanukkah, that we can get spiritual levels that we can't get throughout the rest of the year. We can only get on Hanukkah. So we should use these days wisely and not waste the moment. All right.